So I want to begin a story. Billy Birch shares this story in his book, In the Wind. He says when he was a senior in high school, he had a remarkable year. He was on the football team and the baseball team in Randallsville, Maryland. That's where he grew up. And believe it or not, they won the state championship on both teams. He was varsity on both teams. Never before in the history of Maryland had any school won both baseball and football. And he said, man, that was an exciting time when they won that. But the week after, something happened he wasn't expecting. He said, you get those kids those aluminum shiny balloons for their birthday, and they always leave them in their room too long, right? And they start to get crinkly, and they kind of droop, and they're just like half up. He said, that's how I felt the week after, second state championship. He said, what's the matter with me? I mean, this is the dream that I had been pursuing so long. I mean, how does it get better than that as a senior? And then they got on this bus and they drove to the governor's mansion, and the governor gave all of the boys this plaque for them to put on their walls at their home and their room, and state championship twice. He says, I'll never forget, he said, I got my plaque and I took it home and I put it on the wall. And he said, I was thinking I would get this sense of happiness, but he said that instead it was just a sense of emptiness. And that began, for him, looking back on it, a journey that would change his life and other people's lives forever. So I'll tell you what happened in a moment. Now we are on our second week of the book of Ecclesiastes. Just a little background here. We talked about last week how the author of Ecclesiastes never says, this is who I am. So in Hebrew, he just calls himself the teacher, which is Koheleth. Some people say Solomon. Some say it's a Solomon type person. I think it's better just to let the mystery be. If God didn't tell us, then, let the mystery be. And so Koheleth is going to describe this journey that he went on where he experimented and he tested his desires. And he must have been a very wealthy and powerful person because he could take every desire to the limit. I mean, most of us can't do that, right? You can't just walk into the car lot and say, I'll take that one, and that one, right? No, you can't do that. Whoever Koheleth was, he was able to do that. He was, whatever he desired, he's like, we'll take it to the limit and see where that goes, okay? And so through this, the Holy Spirit is going to teach us something very powerful. And so the first desire that Koheleth notices within himself is for a system of thought, that there would be a way that you could see the world that would make sense of everything. There's whole religions and movements that are based around that. A lot of the Eastern religions are like, if you could just see reality for what it is, then you'll truly be happy, right? And there's philosophies and things like that. So this is what he has. He has this desire. If I could just have this right system of thought, then I will be happy. That's what his desire is telling him. Ecclesiastes 1:12 through 18, and I abbreviated some of these texts because, man, there's a lot. So I decided to seek out and study the wisdom of the ages. There's an old saying, something crooked cannot be made straight, and something missing cannot be counted. For as my wisdom increased, so did my vexation. As my knowledge grew, so did my pain. So he searches all of these different systems of thought, and instead of him being happy, he's more frustrated. My vexation increased. Instead of there being a system of thought that makes sense of the world, that makes him happy, instead he discovers that the world seems crooked. Something missing cannot be counted. I don't know if you had this experience, but sometimes when I was in elementary school, the teacher would say, you're going to grade your own math test. And then you get to number 5, and she says, don't worry about that. There was a number missing. You all get that right. And you say, okay, I got one right today. You always love the freebies, right? And you think, well, that's why I couldn't figure it out. There was a number missing. It didn't make sense. And Koheleth says that's what happened when I looked at the world. It just doesn't make sense. There's nothing. Why does this happen to this person and not that person? What's missing here? Didn't make sense to him. Instead of being happy, he became more and more frustrated. Ian Proverb, he wrote a commentary on Ecclesiastes, and he said that when he was in college, he went to this party. And he said over in the corner, there was this guy who's a philosophy major. He's one of the best. He's getting all the A's and stuff. And so he's studying all of these philosophies. And he's over in the corner of the party next to the wall with a big bottle of vodka, banging his head rhythmically against the wall. And Ian thought, I don't know if philosophy has the answers, because it's not making him happy. And that's what Koheleth experiences. He searches out all of this stuff, and he discovers it doesn't make us happy. He discovers that his desire lied to him. You ever had a desire lie to you before? It told you, you'll be happy if this happens, and gosh darn it, that desire lied to me. That's what he discovers. This desire, it lied to me. It told me I'd be happy, and I'm not happy. I feel more empty than ever. So then the next thing that he does is this. He tests pleasure. Well, if there's not a system of thought, let's just take pleasure to the limit. And remember, he can do it. He can do it, whatever the pleasure is. He's got the credit card for it. He can do it. He can do it. This desire says, if you just take pleasure to the limit, then you'll really be happy. Ecclesiastes 2:1-2 said, I said to myself, let me dabble and test you in pleasure and see if there's any good in that. But look, that too was fleeting. Of laughter, I said, foolishness of pleasure, and in the end, what is accomplished? It reminds me of the line from the U2 song, The Wanderer, that they wrote in tribute to Johnny Cash. I went out there in search of experience, to taste and touch and feel as much as a man can before he repents. That's what he did. He went out there to taste and touch and see and feel as much as a man can before he repents. And he realizes that the desire had lied to him. He said, this desire told me that if I just took pleasure to the limit, I would be happy, but I'm not. I feel empty inside. So the next thing that he decides to experiment with is the high life, because he has another desire. It says, that's what you need. You need a life of luxury. The high life, you need to experience that, and you'll be happy. Ecclesiastes 2:3 says, so I thought about drinking wine, for it soothes the flesh, but all the while my mind was filled with thoughts of wisdom about how to rein in foolishness until I might understand the best way for us to live out our brief lives and number of days under heaven. So scholars say that he's not talking about going down to the corner store and buying a big, box of cheap wine and getting drunk till he can't think. No, he's testing wine while he's thinking. This is the high life. He wants the rarest and the finest and the best of everything. And he experiences it. He experiences the high life, and it just leaves him empty. He realizes that desire had lied to him. It reminds me, I heard of the story of Jack Barnes. So Jack said, some people growing up don't know what they want to do. He says, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. He says, I'm going to be a doctor. He said, even when I was 4, I had this doctor outfit for Halloween, and I dressed up like a doctor. He said, I am going to be a doctor. So he worked real hard, and he went to college, did pre-med. He had a near-perfect MCAT that gets you into med school. And he said, I'm only going to apply to the top 3 schools in the country. And he got into all 3. By the time he reached his 30s, he had a really, really successful plastic surgery operation going. He said, I'd married the wife of my dreams. He said, we had 2 vacation homes. One was $2.5 million in Hawaii. He said, we had sports cars. He said, for my wife, whatever she wanted, the rarest wine, diamond rings. He says, there was no limit. He said, we lived the high life. Whatever we wanted, we got. He said, but then I ended up 3 days a week in a psychiatrist's office because I felt so incredibly empty. He said, I couldn't feel like I could almost live anymore. He had it all. Jack had it all. And it left him not feeling happy, but ultimately just terribly, terribly, terribly empty inside. That's what Koheleth experienced. He lived the high life and just ended up empty, and that didn't work. And so he has this other desire within them. Koheleth, if you just experience and accomplish something great, that's what you need. You need to accomplish something with your life. If you can feel like you've accomplished something, then you'll be happy. You know, a lot of people deal with this, don't they? They say, I feel like I haven't accomplished enough in life. If I could just accomplish more, then I would be happy. And so he listens to that desire that tells him if he accomplishes, he'll be happy. Ecclesiastes 2, 4 through 6 says, next I began some enormous projects, building my own houses and planting my own vineyards. I designed impressive gardens and parks and planted them with all kinds of fruit trees. I installed pools of water to irrigate the forest of young saplings. And so here he is, and he has these great king-size projects. I mean, he can look for acres and acres and all these great, parks and gardens and pools and multiple palaces all over. He accomplishes great things, but in the end, it doesn't make him happy. He realizes that desire had lied to him. He was as empty as ever before. It reminds me, I read about Esa Salonen. He was the music director for the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And the Walt Disney Corporation gave him this opportunity of a lifetime. They said, we have a project we're going to do. It's going to be called the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And he says, there's going to be no limit to the finances we're going to put into this. It will be the concert hall of the century. And you get to design it. Wow. So this is the privilege of a lifetime. And so he spent a decade pouring into this and accomplishing this thing. He said, man, it was better than I even dreamed. What a concert hall. As soon as it was accomplished, he said, I experienced a sadness I don't seem to be able to shake. Paul Krugman won the Nobel Prize, and he said a few days after that, he distinctly remembers a conversation with his wife where they're both feeling disenchanted by winning the Nobel Prize. She said, Paul, you don't have time for this. You got people calling you, bugging you about this Nobel Prize thing, Empty, empty, empty. We could go on and on about all sorts of people who have accomplished great things, but in the end, after it was accomplished, all they were left with this profound sense of emptiness. That is what Koheleth experiences. Next, he has a desire within himself for money, sex, and power. Ecclesiastes 2:8, he says, I acquired male and female servants. I even had servants born into my household. I had herds of cattle, flocks of sheep and goats, more than anyone who had ever lived in Jerusalem before me. I amassed a fortune in silver and gold, and I stockpiled the treasures of kings and provinces. I hired men and women to sing and entertain me. I pampered myself with what every man desires, many women. So here's Koheleth, and he's a powerful Near Eastern king, and they don't have Spotify. And he wants to listen to music. So he has a whole staff of singers that he hires, and all he has to do is say, hey, sing me that again. And I don't know how he shuffled music, or if there was commercials. They're like, Geico. He's like, no, skip. Off with your heads, no commercials. I mean, what kind of money do you have to just have a group of people that are just waiting there for you to want to listen to something? You say, shut up, I'm done. No, play that one again. He has it all. Money, sex, power. We learn in a few verses, he realizes that desire had lied to him because he's just as empty as ever before. Next, fame. This next desire says, well, if accomplishment's not going to do it for you, money, sex, and power, you need to be famed. You need to be known as great. And if you are famous, if people know you, then you'll really be happy. Now, most of us, probably don't think one day, I'll be famous. But, they talk about this thing called mini fame that people look for on social media. If you could have the mini fame, some people are driving for that too. Okay. Lower hanging fruit. Anyways, so he has this desire for fame. Ecclesiastes 2:9. I surrounded myself with all this and become great, far greater than anyone else who has ever lived in Jerusalem before me, and still my wisdom never left my side. Learn in a few verses, he gets the fame, and he realizes his desire had lied to him. It had told him if he had fame, he'd be happy, but he's left just as empty as ever before. I was reading this book on happiness research. It was kind of interesting, And they said one of the things was, exactly what Scripture says, that we as humans have this tendency to think something is going to make us happy that ultimately won't. Something the way humans work, and we drive for it. But anyways, so they did some interviews of people who had seemingly had everything from a worldly perspective and lost it, and wanted to know what their happiness levels were like. Are they totally in the dumps after they lost everything? So this guy Neil allowed them to interview him. So they drive to where Neil lives, and it's in the prairie of Canada, way up north, Manitoba, I think. They pull up to interview Neil, and it's a very modest ranch home with a big pile of dirt in front, okay? And I have a big pile of dirt at my house, so don't worry, I'm not picking on anybody. So they pull up, and they get out, and it's July. And there's this brisk wind, and it's cold. Like, oh my gosh. If it is cold in July up here, what's it like in January? And like, this dude must travel 45 minutes to get milk. He's out in the middle of nowhere. They knock on the door, and Neil opens the door. He's got 2 kids. He's a single dad. And they said, so Neil, refresh us on your story. He goes, well, yeah, I was a rock star. You know my band, and had this album. We're super successful, and played on Saturday Night Live, the whole thing. He had had it all. Then the band broke up, lost it, lost his money, lost his big house, and his wife said, I didn't sign up for this. And he moves to Canada with his 2 kids, out in the middle of nowhere, with a cold wind in July and a big pile of dirt in front of his house. And I said, what's your happiness levels then and now? He goes, no difference. He goes, I'm just as happy as ever before. I work on my music in my garage, and I'm just as happy. Me and my kids, we have a good life, no worries. So Koheleth experienced that fame didn't do it. It didn't make him happy. Halfway through this experiment, he comes to this realization. He says, what was the conclusion? My mind found joy in the work I did. My work was its own reward. As I continued musing over all I had accomplished and the hard work it took, I concluded that all this too was fleeting, like trying to embrace the wind. Is there any real gain by all our hard work under the sun? So he says, my mind found work in all the joy I did. My work was my own reward. What is he saying? We've all probably experienced this before. You have this goal, this desire, and there's some joy in going after it, the journey. But then when you get it, that's when there's the letdown and the emptiness. There's some joy in going for it, but when you get it, that's when the emptiness sets in. We started the sermon with Billy Birch. He said, man, when I was a senior in high school and we were driving towards this goal to be the state champs, he said, there was some joy in that. The camaraderie of my fellow players, coach, hard practices, the ups and the downs, not knowing, are we going to win, not win? He's like, there was joy, but then once we accomplished it, emptiness. See, Koheleth experienced what we probably all experience sometimes. Sometimes there's joy in the journey, but then you get there, that's when the emptiness sets in. That's what the emptiness sets in. It reminds me, if you didn't hear before, in 1985, Geraldo. We can talk about Geraldo at the bridge. We talk about who we want, right? I don't watch Geraldo. Isn't he like a talk show guy or whatever? He's a talk show guy. I don't know. Anyways, Geraldo. So he had this thing. I think it was like millions of people watching, where he's going to open Al Capone's vault. You remember that? Yeah. So they get what's in Al Capone's vault, and everybody's really, really excited, and all the people are watching on TV, and the reporters are there, and they open the vault, and what's in it? Nothing. The life can be that way. There's excitement in pursuing the thing, and then you open, and it's just emptiness. 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 The next thing that Koheleth notices within himself is the most noble desire. And it says, Koheleth, this is what you need, enough of this accomplishment and fame and money, power. You need a life well lived. Koheleth, if you just live a life well lived, his desire tells him, a wise life, then you'll be happy. Seems like a good desire, right? This is what he experiences. I turn my attention to the ways of wisdom and folly and madness. I realize that wisdom is better than folly. Yet I knew deep down that the same fate comes to both of them. I said to myself, why do I try to be wise when the fate